Hi, everybody. I hope you are having a really good afternoon. I just wanted to come on and so that way you guys could add a little bit to your notes today. We are going to go over this again on Monday, just briefly because we'll have to go through the other families as well. But I will post your document up for you guys to catch up on your notes as well as show you in this video. So I'd like you to pause the video at this time so you can get your washed up notes up in front of you while I talk you through what the next activity is going to be. So go ahead and pause the video and come back as soon as you have these notes on. So at this time, you should have paused your video, had your washed up notes up, and now you're back to do the next part of our instruction. So yesterday during small group, we talked about comparing and contrasting two different settings in washed up, and I let your group pick which setting they wanted to talk about. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about those settings, but I really want to stress that we're going to be talking about pulling text evidence, and I mean direct text evidence, quotes. We're not going to be looking at the photos today. We're going to be pulling direct quotes from the story because I'm looking for imagery words, not imagery pictures, but words specifically. And the reason we're doing this, one, because I want you practicing setting, I want you practicing imagery and visualizing, but I also want you to understand that when we're talking about setting, sometimes what happens is kids get really wrapped up in these ideas about what something might look like. So for example, when we were talking about setting in our groups yesterday, I had a lot of kids telling me animals that they thought might be in this setting, but they didn't get it from the story. So we have to be pulling our information when we're talking about settings from the story directly. So that's another reason why we are practicing this today. So we're starting with our Lou family, and up on the right, I have my chapter 2 from Washed Up. I just pulled it up from a previous agenda. I believe this was on Monday's agenda this week. Yeah, I believe it was on Monday's agenda for this week for you to read independently, okay? But I also have it pulled up on the right so we could take a look at it together. So we're looking specifically for words in the story that support our setting. So we know that the Lou's are on top of this mountain, right? We know that they're on this mountain. So we're looking for words in the story that support that text evidence, that support that setting by using text evidence, okay? So I really want to look at this first part here. It says, Mrs. Lou's teeth were chattering already. Look warm, she stuttered, still sparing a frozen smile for the flying cameras. Mr. Lou's speech was slurred. No animal can survive this, right? He's slurring his speech. They're very cold, guys. But some of those words that we pull from the story support that. So, for example, here where it says, still sparing a frozen smile. So on your document, you should be writing this as well. We're going to say, still sparing a frozen smile. Notice how I used quotation marks because I pulled a direct quote. Because I'm also pulling a direct quote, I have to cite where I found this in the story. So I found this on page 24 in chapter 2. So I've got my quotation, I've got my imagery words that support my setting of the mountain is very cold. Okay, so we're still sparing that frozen smile. All right, and if you need to pause the video to type these, that's okay. Just pause it and pick right back up where you left off, okay? So I'm also going to use this other sentence here on 25 that supports that idea of it being cold. And that goes back to that idea of hypothermia. So it says the twins exchanged looks, early signs of hypothermia. Can't talk, my brain's tired. So I'm going to type in early signs of hypothermia. Put my quotes around it again, and this one is on page 25, but it still is supporting that setting of the mountain is very cold. Okay. Now, after we have moved away from the mountain is very cold, the next part of our story actually talks about some animals that are there. These are important for our setting to know where we are located on this mountain and what's around us in our setting. So if you see, it says, Gelida baboons, said May, reading Shen's thoughts as always. Didn't these primates of the Ethiopian highlands escape their wind-swept habitat by climbing down steep cliffs faces at nightfall, roosting in ledges? So we know that these baboons are part of our setting. They make up where we are located. So in the next section, because I'm talking about a different area, I'm going to say gelada baboons. Straight from the story, it's a quotation, and it's on page 25. The part of the setting that this supports is the animals living on the mountain, right? They make up that part of the setting too, just like we were talking about yesterday. And again, if you need to pause to get those things typed in, that's fine. You can pause and then just resume our video when you're ready. Okay. The next part that I really wanted to talk about was this last part here on page 25. It says, Shen felt the wind stinging his eyes as he peered over the edge of the mountain to look at a narrow sill, only a few feet down. So right here where it says the edge of the mountain, the edge of the mountain. So that places us not in the middle of the mountain, but on the edge, okay? So I'm going to shorten that just a little bit and say he peered over the edge of the mountain, okay? And that again is on page 25. That shows us that they are on the edge of the mountainside. Not the middle, but actually on the edge. So again, if you need to pause to type those in, that's fine. Pause your video, and then you can come back to it as soon as you are caught up. There is one more part that I wanted to point out. Here it is. It's a little further up. I apologize, I skipped it before. But it says the minutes were slipping away as fast as their body heat could now, and Shen knew the cold. The air was making it hard for him to think. The thin air was making it hard for him to think. So we're going to say the thin air was making it hard for him to think. It's very important that we talk about that air is thin, and that's because it tells us where on the mountain they are located. Here you go. I just moved it down to the next section. So where on this mountainside are they located? The reason air gets thin is because the higher up you go, that's why in plains, when you're very high up, there is less oxygen. So it's harder to physically breathe the higher you go. So when you're on real high on a mountain, it's very hard to breathe. That's why when you're on like Mount Everest, they all have to wear those masks that give them extra oxygen, because the higher they go, the more difficult it becomes to breathe. Okay. So we can say, because the air was very thin, they are on the top of the mountain, right? They're towards the top. They're definitely not the bottom. They're not on the bottom side of this mountain, because the air would not be so thin. Okay. So you should have all these notes written down for the Lous for Monday. We will review them together on Monday very briefly, and then we will start on the Walpoles and the Garcias, looking at that setting and those imagery words. Okay. Thanks again, guys. I'm sorry I couldn't be here, and I hope you have a really great weekend. I will see you Monday at 1 p.m. Bye, guys.